High in the mountains, there lies a village cut off from the rest of the world for half the year. Snow seals the passes, silence rules the valleys, and time itself seems to move differently there. To outsiders, it's just another forgotten settlement. But inside, a secret older than memory has shaped the lives of its men for 6 generations. Each full moon, rituals are performed, not for spectacle, not for faith, but for survival. And with every passing generation, the children born here carry marks of a transformation no one can fully explain. Horns that curve from their skulls, strength beyond their years, and an intelligence that feels almost otherworldly. How did this begin? What desperate choice could have bound men to a pact so strange, so unshakable, that even centuries later their sons still bear its weight? And now, as the 6th generation comes of age, the reckoning that was once whispered about is finally here. Before we dive into this hidden history, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the full journey. Share this video with a friend who loves untold stories and mysteries, because what you're about to hear isn't just history. It's a secret on the edge of revelation. The village of Capraholm lay cradled in a mountain basin, sealed away by towering ridges that permitted entry only during summer months. For half the year, snow locked the passes, keeping the men within. Generations of fathers had taught their sons that the world beyond those ridges was vast, unpredictable, and often hostile. Inside the valley, however, life followed older rhythms, dictated by rituals, seasons, and inherited secrets. From a distance, the settlement appeared ordinary. Log homes with smoke drifting from chimneys, goat herds grazing high pastures, men chopping wood or mending tools. Yet beneath that simplicity, something stranger lingered. Every boy born in Capraholm knew from childhood that he was different. Some noticed too keen senses, others an unusual endurance in the biting cold. By adolescence, faint bumps beneath thick hair revealed the truth. The horns came gradually, sometimes no larger than thumb-sized nubs, sometimes curling into unmistakable shapes by adulthood. Fathers reassured their sons it was a blessing, the mountain's gift, but unease never fully disappeared. Legends told by firelight traced the beginning to the founders. 15 families escaping persecution, led by Vermel, a man whose resolve had carried them beyond starvation and into this hidden refuge. The first winter nearly destroyed them. Crops shriveled in frost, hunting yielded little, and 7 children perished. Men carried their dead into frozen earth, shoulders shaking beneath grief's weight, despair whispering louder than prayers. It was Alar's brother, Laron, who followed goat bells into high caverns. There, cave paintings depicted unions between men and horned creatures beneath the moon. The meaning was unclear, but desperation clouded judgment. That night, the first communion took place. A ritual enacted with goat and man sharing breath, blood, and presence. No one spoke openly of what transpired, but survival followed, undeniable and frightening. Crops flourished, herds multiplied, and sons were born healthy. Yet along with strength came horns, first subtle, then increasingly prominent. By the 2nd generation, concealment was no longer perfect. Still, prosperity silenced questions. Capraholm became a place where silence spoke louder than words. Fathers explained little, teaching only ritual gestures, reminding sons that secrecy kept the village alive. To question too deeply meant destabilizing everything. The elders preserved a journal, leather-bound and fragile, detailing crop yields, births, and deaths. In cold script, they noted children with bone protrusions. Later, hands abandoned objectivity, calling them divine blessings instead. Each generation hardened around tradition. Men carried goats to ritual chambers carved deep into rock, where firelight cast spirals upon walls marked with ancient figures. They returned altered, voices heavy with unspoken knowledge. Outsiders rarely stumbled upon Capraholm, and when they did, herbal teas clouded memory before guides escorted them back to valleys below. To remain unnoticed was as sacred as the communion itself, yet by the sixth generation, horns grew too prominent to hide beneath hats or hair. Sons wrestled with their reflection in icy water, wondering whether they were still men or something beyond. Some fathers accepted transformation proudly, displaying horns like ancestral crowns. Others hunched in shame, pulling caps low, dreading the outside world's gaze. Between reverence and resentment, the village carried its paradox forward. The valley itself mirrored this duality. Gentle pastures lay beside jagged cliffs, fertile soil beside lethal avalanche slopes. Survival demanded constant vigilance, teaching boys that balance between danger and abundance defined life here. From an early age, sons were hardened by mountain tasks, hauling timber, tending goats, climbing ridges with baskets of stone. These labors toughened limbs while concealing the greater weight within. At dusk, goat bells echoed against cliffs. Men whispered prayers in low tones, hands touching horns unconsciously, as though the mountain itself listened. The rituals kept their world alive, but questions remained. Why goats? Why horns? Why them? Fathers never offered direct answers. Instead, they told their sons, "The mountain gave us this gift. It sustains us. Do not seek what cannot be explained." But curiosity simmered beneath silence. Young men stared at their growing horns in secret, tugging hair across temples, fearing discovery, fearing themselves. Identity in Capraholm was inseparable from the inheritance of bone. The journal hinted at prophecy, that the sixth generation would face a reckoning. Its last entries warned of horns too large to conceal, sons too different to be mistaken for ordinary men. Fathers gathered at the council stone, arguing in hushed voices. Some claimed the communion was the only reason Capraholm still thrived. Others feared the price had grown too steep to justify continuation. Meanwhile, boys played in fields, their laughter carrying under cold skies. Horns glinted as sunlight touched hairlines. They were reminders that innocence and strangeness walked hand in hand in this secluded world. Capraholm's men lived with contradictions. They celebrated the strength horns gave them, resistance to sickness, heightened senses, sharper instincts. Yet they feared what horns announced, separation from the world beyond mountains. The goats themselves were no ordinary animals. Their amber eyes reflected unsettling intelligence. They gathered when summoned, responded almost to unspoken thought. To herd them was less work, more communion. Generations of herders claimed the goats protected the village, circling around children when wolves prowled, guiding men through snowstorms. Their behavior blurred lines between companion, protector, and something sacredly entangled with human fate. Each full moon, the ritual chamber opened. Fathers led their sons for the first time, torches illuminating carved walls. There they joined hands with goats, exchanging breath, life force, and something unseen. The communion left men with warmth coursing through their bodies, a resonance that endured for weeks. But with it came dreams, vivid visions of horns, mountains, and an ancestry older than memory. Some awoke exhilarated, convinced they were chosen. Others awoke trembling, uncertain whether they remained themselves. The ritual bound them together, yet isolation deepened, making them strangers to both humanity and myth. The mountain passes remained guardians of secrecy. When snow fell, they closed like stone gates. For 6 months, no outsider could breach Capraholm. Within those walls, transformation advanced without witness. As winters grew harsher, men pressed closer to the sacred herd, drawing more from rituals. The line between necessity and devotion blurred until no man could remember a time before communion. Children asked their fathers why horns grew faster now. Fathers answered only with silence, a hand resting on the boy's shoulder. a look that carried pride and fear in equal measure. The council preserved horns of ancestors in glass cases, displayed like family heirlooms. Each pair marked another step away from the human image. Sons gazed at them, glimpsing both destiny and burden. Not all agreed on reverence. Some young men whispered of ending the ritual altogether, but elders warned that without communion, crops would fail, goats would wither, and the valley would starve. Dissent simmered quietly. A few men dreamed of leaving, venturing beyond mountains, disguising their horns. Yet stories of persecution haunted memory. To reveal themselves meant risking ridicule, fear, or extermination. Thus Capraholm stood at a fragile edge, a community both blessed and cursed. The mountain gave them strength, but also chained them with horns they could neither deny nor explain. Storms rolled across peaks, shaking rooftops and filling rivers. Men sat by hearths, sharpening blades, repairing boots, always glancing at the mountains as though waiting for some final judgment from the sky. In that waiting, fathers passed secrets to sons. Survival required silence, unity, and obedience to ritual. Yet beneath obedience, every boy wondered, was this truly survival, or the beginning of something else? Capraholm's story had reached its threshold. 6 generations of men carried horns, each larger than the last. The mountain still protected them, but even stone cannot hold a secret forever. The first communion had its roots in desperation, not devotion. 6 generations ago, fathers huddled around dwindling fires, watching their sons starve as frost burned fields. Hunger gnawed sharper than wolves, pushing men toward choices unthinkable before. Alar Vermal, leader of the founders, bore the weight of 15 families. His younger brother, Laren, wandered into caverns guided by goat bells. There, ancient paintings revealed horned figures kneeling before mountain beasts under a pale moon. Laren returned, changed, eyes fever-bright, speaking of survival hidden in ritual. Some men mocked his visions, but hunger silenced their laughter. Children's ribs pressed through skin, fathers buried sons in shallow graves of frozen dirt. The council of men debated until torches dimmed. Finally, driven by despair, they followed Laren into the caves. Each carried tokens, carved wood, flint blades, bones of ancestors, hoping something unseen might grant mercy. Within the cavern, shadows danced across ochre figures painted millennia earlier. Men saw horned shapes embracing goats, sharing breath and essence. Skeptical, fearful but desperate, they imitated what stone walls demanded, creating communion neither understood nor desired. The first ritual was no polished tradition. Men stumbled through chants, pressed foreheads to goats' horns, breathed mist into their nostrils. What began as mimicry felt suddenly alive, as if mountains themselves answered their cries. When dawn came, the valley stirred differently. Crops sprouted unexpectedly green beneath frost, goats birthed twins, and weak sons woke with renewed vigor. Fathers who had resigned themselves to death felt life return unexplainably strong. From then on, the communion repeated. Each full moon, men descended into caverns, reenacting the exchange. They spoke less of faith and more of survival, binding themselves to goats as kin rather than beasts. Horns began small, barely noticeable. The earliest sons carried faint nubs, mistaken for odd bone growths. Yet elders documented every detail, recording in their leather-bound journal with clinical precision, though unease spread among fathers. By the second generation, horns became undeniable. Some curved elegantly, others jutted forward bluntly. Men whispered both awe and fear, unsure whether these were divine blessings or punishments born from reckless ritual during famine's grip. Still, no father could deny results. Children lived longer, crops endured, winters became survivable. The communion guaranteed survival, a pact sealed in silence. Whatever the price, men would pay, for their sons would live. The journal shifted tone over years. Early entries spoke of doubt, cautious notes about mutations. Later scribes replaced science with reverence, calling horns sacred marks, proof that mountain spirits had chosen Capraholm's men. Ritual grew refined with time. Torches were placed with precision, chants synchronized, offerings laid before the altar. Fathers taught sons exact gestures, ensuring communion retained continuity across generations, not mere accident of memory. Yet beneath reverence, fear persisted. Outsiders could never learn the truth. Men remembered persecution that once drove them here. If the world beyond valleys saw their horns, extermination would follow swiftly. Silence preserved them. Each communion deepened strangeness. Men described warmth spreading through bones, clarity sharpening thoughts, dreams filled with visions of mountains and stars. Some awoke certain they were more than human. Others dreaded what they became. Fathers bore dual burdens, pride in their sons' resilience and terror of what horns signified. By candlelight, they whispered, "Better horned and alive than human and buried." Yet doubts haunted their solitude. The goats themselves seemed altered, as if touched by ritual too. Their amber eyes glowed strangely in torchlight. Herd leaders bowed heads in acknowledgement, responding to unspoken thoughts. Men began to call them brothers. Generations of herders noticed uncanny intelligence in the sacred herd. Goats gathered protectively around children, warned of avalanches, even guided men through storms. Such behavior blurred lines between animal and kin, deepening reliance upon them. Legends spread that goats carried knowledge from forgotten gods, sharing fragments with men through communion. Some sons believed horns were antennas to higher realms. Others dismissed myth, yet none could explain their mounting transformations. Still, every boy reaching adolescence awaited first communion with dread and anticipation. Fathers prepared them carefully, fasting, cleansing, and solemn words, reminding sons their survival depended upon this ancient pact with beasts. The descent into ritual chamber was unforgettable. Torches cast spirals across walls, drums echoed against stone, and goats entered with deliberate calm. Boys pressed foreheads to horns, breath mingling, essence passing unseen between species. Those who emerged carried altered eyes. They described sounds sharper, air crisper, colors richer. Their fathers watched silently, understanding change had begun, irreversible and permanent. Boys became part of covenant older than memory. Not all endured easily. Some fainted during ritual, others wept uncontrollably, overwhelmed by visions. Elders reassured them. Communion sometimes tested the weak before granting strength. In time, even fragile sons grew into resilience. Over decades, ritual evolved into spectacle of survival. Songs composed by fathers echoed within caverns, recounting famine overcome, prosperity secured. Yet no man forgot origin, a desperate gamble that rewrote their lineage forever. Outside world remained oblivious. Traders who occasionally stumbled near Capraholm never glimpsed horns. Men concealed bone beneath wool caps, spoke little, exchanged goods swiftly, and guided strangers away before suspicion stirred. The communion thus thrived in secrecy, sealed by stone passes and fear. Each winter reinforced their dependence. To abandon ritual meant returning to famine's grip. Few dared question what had become indispensable. Some sons, however, did question. They asked fathers whether communion enslaved them. Why should men bow to beasts? Fathers answered with tired eyes, "Because without it, you would not be here to ask." The journal grew heavier with each generation. Horn measurements, fertility rates, crop successes, everything noted. Prophecy emerged from final entries. Sixth generation would face reckoning when horns could no longer be hidden beneath hair. That warning weighed heavily. Fathers glanced at sons whose horns curved proudly. Some whispered pride, others whispered fear. What once saved them now threatened discovery, a truth buried but growing harder to conceal. The first communion, born of starvation, had altered destiny. Whether miracle or mutation, no man could say. What they knew was this: survival had demanded sacrifice, and sacrifice had forever reshaped Capraholm's bloodline. Men carried stories of the founders like scripture. Around fires, fathers retold how famine forced choices that seemed madness, yet birthed survival. Boys listened wide-eyed, sensing pride and sorrow mingling in every word. Each ritual night reaffirmed covenant. Torches, chants, and offerings bound men again to goats. Even skeptics performed gestures dutifully. To break tradition was to endanger crops, herds, and sons alike. Fear ensured loyalty. Some men dreamed of ending communion, but always storms, illness, or hunger returned, reminding them of dependence. The ritual was both salvation and shackle, binding men tighter with every passing generation. As sixth generation dawned, whispers grew louder. Horns sprouted faster, sharper, more visible. Fathers could no longer hide their sons beneath caps. The prophecy seemed close, and the reckoning promised by the journal approached. Yet even knowing this, no man refused communion. Hunger's memory lingered too deep, carved into marrow. To abandon ritual was unthinkable. The mountain had chosen them, and they would endure, horns or not. Thus, the first communion, born of famine's cruelty, endured across centuries. It transformed ordinary men into something unrecognizable, yet kept them alive when death stalked valleys. Whether blessing or curse, the covenant bound them still. And in Capraholm, survival mattered more than truth. Fathers reminded sons each full moon, the mountain keeps its own. No one dared speak otherwise, for silence preserved them as much as ritual did. The Horned Sons of Capraholm were not legends, but living proof of the communion's lasting impact. Boys grew into men carrying bone crowns that could no longer be mistaken for deformities or hidden beneath cloth. From infancy, fathers examined their sons' temples, feeling beneath soft hair for the hard nubs that inevitably emerged. Some grew slowly, others with startling speed, yet all boys carried the unmistakable inheritance of horns. As they matured, horns became symbols both feared and revered. Elders praised their strength and endurance, yet younger men looked into icy waters and questioned what those horns truly meant for their identity. By adolescence, sons compared growth secretly, measuring subtle curves against one another. Pride mingled with shame. Larger horns drew respect in Capraholm, but would draw suspicion beyond mountains. Each boy lived with dual awareness. Goat herders, often isolated in pastures, displayed their horns openly. Among goats, concealment was unnecessary, and horns even seemed to command respect. Within villages, however, caps and hoods concealed them from rare, wandering eyes. Fathers taught their sons to move carefully around strangers. Do not let the wind lift your cap. Do not bow too low. Do not reveal what others will never understand. Silence preserved survival. Despite secrecy, horns shaped daily life. They altered balance, strengthened skulls, and gave men uncanny resilience. Some found themselves able to withstand harsh blows. Others claimed heightened perception, all bound by this shared transformation. Children of outsiders who married into Capraholm sometimes bore smaller horns, yet none were spared completely. The bloodline's mark grew stronger with each generation, as if the mountain's will refused dilution or retreat. Horns became genealogical records. Elders traced lineage through shape and curve, recalling whose ancestor carried spirals, whose bore blunt ridges. Families took pride in unique variations, even while fearing their exposure beyond Capraholm. The sacred journal recorded every detail with precision. Measurements, sketches, comparisons, all preserved across centuries. For elders, the journal was proof of continuity. For sons, it was a mirror reflecting futures they could not escape. Among themselves, horned men found brotherhood. Shared strangeness forged unity stronger than kinship. Around fires, they removed caps, bearing horns openly, celebrating resilience with laughter, even when unease lingered beneath merriment's fragile surface. But not every son accepted horns easily. Some cursed their fate, longing to look like men beyond mountains. They asked why survival demanded transformation. Fathers rarely answered, eyes clouded with memories of famine. Dreams haunted horned sons. After communion, many reported visions, mountains splitting, stars whispering, goats speaking with voices older than language. Some embraced these dreams as destiny. Others woke sweating, terrified by glimpses of becoming. Work in forests and fields revealed undeniable advantages. Horned men carried timber longer, endured freezing winds with ease, and recovered swiftly from injuries. Strength became proof of blessing, though its source remained unexplainable. Even so, whispers persisted that horns were a curse. Young men sometimes hid for days, ashamed of curves pressing through hair. Elders countered such doubts, reminding them horns had kept Capraholm alive. The sacred herd seemed attuned to horned sons. Goats responded uniquely to boys, moving protectively or lowering heads in acknowledgement. As horns grew, connection deepened, binding man and beast in strange, undeniable kinship. During festivals, fathers allowed brief moments of pride. Sons danced with horns uncovered, shadows cast like crowns upon snow. For a night, shame lifted, replaced by unity beneath mountain skies and crackling fires. Still, the outside world loomed. Traders occasionally passed valleys, and every horned boy learned rules of concealment. A single slip could unravel generations of secrecy. Fear of discovery sharpened vigilance within all. Elders often reminded youth of prophecy, the reckoning awaiting sixth generation. Horns had grown too prominent, too swift. If concealment failed, Capraholm faced choices darker than any winter storm could bring. Sons carried that burden. Skeptics among the young questioned whether prophecy mattered. They asked if horns were simply natural adaptation to mountain life, not mystical fate. Such doubts, though whispered quietly, hinted at division within generations. Training for horned sons began early. Fathers hardened them with hunting, climbing, and cold water immersions, forging resilience. Survival meant not just physical strength, but discipline to endure suspicion, concealment, and silence in equal measure. Sons longed to see beyond passes, but fathers warned of danger. The world will not accept you. Horns are not crowns there, they are curses. That warning hung over every ambitious heart. Despite restrictions, curiosity persisted. Some older boys attempted secret journeys toward valleys. Those who returned described strange stares from strangers, whispers of devil marks. Such encounters reinforced why secrecy had always been paramount. Among themselves, sons shared tales of ancestors whose horns had curled magnificently. They dreamed of wearing them proudly someday, yet also feared the outside world's judgment. Identity swung between pride and concealment daily. Goat herders reported deeper bonds as horns matured. Some claimed to sense herd movement before seeing it. Others swore they understood bleats as language. Horns seemed more than bone. They were conduits for perception. Fathers rarely spoke openly of such phenomena, fearing superstition. Yet around private fires, they admitted horns made them more than ordinary men. Whether this was gift or curse, none dared define clearly. When disputes erupted, horns played subtle roles. A man with larger spirals often commanded more respect, even unconsciously. Strength of bone became silent hierarchy, shaping leadership choices alongside wisdom and experience. The youngest sons, still with small nubs, looked to elders with awe. They saw horns as symbols of manhood, yearning for their own to grow. unaware of the lifelong burden that awaited. As generations passed, horns grew increasingly elaborate. What once appeared as small protrusions now curved proudly within early adolescence. Elders worried this acceleration would make concealment impossible, prophecies warning inching ever closer. Despite fears, life continued. Men chopped timber, herded goats, tended crops, raised sons. Horns became ordinary within Capraholm, extraordinary only in how they separated men from the world beyond mountains. Survival demanded balance. Stories circulated of ancient tribes that vanished after transformations. Cave paintings hinted at beings neither human nor goat. Sons looked upon such images uneasily, wondering if they were echoes of their own destiny. Some nights, horned sons gathered secretly at cliffs, removing caps, letting moonlight gleam upon bone. They whispered questions no elder could answer. What are we becoming? Can horns ever be more than prison? The mountain answered only with silence, wind howling across ridges. Yet in that silence they found strange comfort. Together, horned sons carried burdens too heavy alone, forging bonds unbreakable as stone peaks above. By dawn, they returned to ordinary routines, concealing horns once more. Yet within them burned knowledge of difference too great to ignore. They were no longer fully human, nor entirely something else. Capraholm endured through this uneasy balance. The horned sons grew into fathers, passing burdens downward. Each generation repeated silence, secrecy, ritual. Still, prophecy lingered, whispering that reckoning approached faster than anyone dared admit. Fathers reminded sons, "We are alive because of horns. Do not forget famine's graves." Sons nodded, but doubt remained. Was survival worth transformation? That unanswered question echoed louder as horns grew larger. In the end, the horned sons embodied both strength and fear. They were blessings and omens, living contradictions. And as sixth generation matured, Capraholm faced not only survival, but the truth of becoming. Snow kept Capraholm hidden most of the year, but summer thaw exposed narrow passes. That was when outsiders occasionally appeared. Hunters, officials, and wanderers who stumbled upon the valley, never understanding the depth of its secret. The first watchers came under banners of empire, carrying maps, compasses, and notebooks. They sought to count villages, draft taxes, and measure resources. Capraholm's men greeted them cautiously, concealing horns beneath thick wool caps. Officials recorded head counts, tallied livestock, and demanded allegiance. Yet something unsettled them. The men seemed unusually strong, their goats strangely disciplined. Though horns remained hidden, suspicion lingered in the sharp eyes of outsiders. Fathers guided officials out quickly, offering hospitality without generosity. Herbal brews clouded memories, leaving visitors disoriented. When they left, they carried vague recollections of a mountain village, never recalling the strange details they half noticed. But not all watchers were so easily dismissed. Scientists eventually followed, driven by curiosity about isolated genetics. They arrived with questions, tools, and persistence that frightened Capraholm's council, for science was harder to deceive than empire's clerks. One scholar, Elias Dorn, remained longer than most. He sketched goats obsessively, measuring horns with calipers, scribbling theories about selective breeding. Yet he failed to notice the boys who avoided him, their hats pulled low. Still, he sensed something. "Your goats seem unusually intelligent," he remarked, "almost responsive." Fathers nodded vaguely, giving noncommittal answers. Behind closed doors, they debated whether Elias must be allowed to leave alive, his suspicions buried forever. Ultimately, storms drove him from the valley. His journal survived, however, containing cryptic notes. "The men are not ordinary. Their bond with goats surpasses herding. I suspect a ritual, though I cannot confirm." Those words troubled elders, for written suspicion could spread. They burned what copies they found, yet feared fragments had reached universities. For the first time, Capraholm realized its secret might not remain eternal. Later, soldiers arrived under different banners. Wars raged in lowlands, and mountains became sanctuaries. Scouts climbed passes, searching for routes and recruits. When they reached Capraholm, they saw strong men capable of bearing arms. Commanders demanded conscription. Fathers refused politely, claiming devotion to goats and land. Soldiers scoffed, but when they glimpsed shadows of horns beneath hats, unease prickled their skin. They withdrew sooner than expected, whispering of devil marks. Stories spread among soldiers of a horned tribe hidden in mountains. Most dismissed them as superstition, yet rumors seeded further curiosity. Each whisper threatened to draw new watchers to Capraholm's guarded valley. Elders tightened rules, sons forbidden from wandering too far, caps mandatory in presence of outsiders, herders instructed to avoid strangers. Still, no rule could fully erase suspicion once watchers had glimpsed something unusual. Some watchers returned disguised as wanderers, seeking evidence. They lingered near pastures, observing goats circling protectively, men moving with uncanny coordination. Though horns remained hidden, strangeness was undeniable. Watchers sensed more than explanations offered. One census agent vanished after entering Capraholm. Official records noted his disappearance during a storm. In truth, elders ensured he never left Valley. His notebooks described horned boys, too great a threat to secrecy. The weight of secrecy hardened men. They knew each outsider might carry their destruction. Sons learned not to trust curiosity, for every question could be dagger aimed at Capraholm's survival. Yet watchers multiplied with each century. Scientists brought instruments, governments brought authority, spies brought hunger for advantage. Horns, once hidden by mountains alone, now faced the scrutiny of men who sought knowledge or power. The goats sensed tension. Herds grew restless during summers when outsiders lingered. Their eyes followed strangers, bleats sharper, movements defensive. Fathers whispered that goats understood danger before men did, guardians of covenant older than memory. Some watchers sought to purchase goats, offering coin for breeding stock. Fathers refused, claiming animals unsuitable for relocation. In truth, they feared communion's bond would be exposed if sacred herd left mountains. Still, persistence grew. Letters from universities promised fortune for specimens, but no goat ever left Capraholm alive. Traders attempting theft returned empty-handed, spooked by horns glimpsed in torchlight or sounds echoing through night. Elders convened more frequently, debating responses. Should Capraholm remain passive or confront watchers directly? Some advocated secrecy by misdirection, feeding outsiders myths of curses and demons to deter investigation. Fear, they reasoned, was stronger than curiosity. So tales spread deliberately. Wanderers left Valley whispering of horned spirits haunting caves, of men cursed for ancient sins. Though terrifying, these stories deflected attention, making Capraholm seem less real, more myth than village. But myths attracted a different kind of watcher, those chasing legends. Explorers and treasure seekers began climbing passes, seeking proof of horned men. For them, myth was not deterrent, but invitation, fueling obsession with discovery. The balance grew fragile. Sons felt weight heavier than ever, caps pressed tightly, heads lowered. A single slip could expose everything. Fathers drilled discipline ruthlessly, knowing one mistake could invite catastrophe. Among council stones, arguments flared. Some declared watchers inevitable, urging openness before exposure came violently. Others swore secrecy must hold, for outsiders would never accept them. The village fractured between silence and revelation. Meanwhile, watchers beyond Valley multiplied. Maps now marked Capraholm faintly, though details remained sparse. Each generation of outsiders added fragments to puzzle, drawing closer to truth, with every cautious entry into mountains. Prophecy echoed louder. Sixth generation would face reckoning. Horns too large, watchers too persistent, secrecy too fragile. No longer could men believe mountains alone would conceal them. A decision loomed heavy as winter clouds. Some sons longed for recognition, tired of shadows. They dreamed of walking openly, horns displayed proudly before cities. Others feared such pride would doom them, inviting chains, cages, or fires lit by fearful mobs. The goats offered no answers. They stood silent, amber eyes reflecting torchlight, as if watching history unfold. Men sought guidance in their presence, but only silence returned, heavier than any elder's words. Watchers wrote letters describing unusual resilience among villagers, uncanny goat behavior, whispers of horns. Though often dismissed, these reports built foundation of suspicion. Each note carried threat of future, where secrecy crumbled completely. Capraholm thus stood at crossroads, torn between silence and exposure. Watchers pressed closer each year, determined to pierce mountain's veil. Inside, suns grew horns impossible to hide. Destiny advanced relentlessly, ignoring wishes of men. The valley felt smaller under gaze of outsiders. Every path seemed dangerous, every firelight vulnerable to spying eyes. Fathers patrolled ridges, guarding passes not only against storms but against men who sought answers. The Horned Sons felt watchers' presence even when unseen. They carried themselves with heavier caution, laughter subdued, joy dimmed. Childhood ended swiftly when secrecy demanded vigilance. Innocence surrendered to burden of concealment. The watchers beyond valley would not vanish. Each generation brought new seekers, new threats. Capraholm's men knew only one certainty. The reckoning prophecy promised was no longer distant. It was approaching with undeniable steps. And beneath shadowed peaks, the horns of sixth generation gleamed brighter, sharper, more visible. Against the persistence of watchers, silence might no longer be enough. The mountain had kept them, but for how long? The sixth generation came of age beneath skies, heavy with omen. Horns grew faster, sharper, and more visible than ever before. Concealment strained against reality, and whispers of prophecy spread like wildfire through Capraholm. Fathers saw their sons struggle with hats slipping, horns pressing through wool. What once could be hidden with ease now protruded unmistakably. Each passing season made silence harder. Each reflection carried undeniable truth. The council gathered often, stones slick with melted snow, voices raised in anger and fear. Some demanded full disclosure, others clung to secrecy. Division grew sharper, threatening to fracture unity that once defined survival. Younger men leaned toward openness, tired of shadows and secrecy. They dreamed of stepping beyond mountains without shame, horns displayed proudly. Elders countered with stories of persecution, reminding them that fear kills faster than famine. Still, horns refused silence. Boys in pastures frightened wandering hunters who glimpsed curves beneath wind-blown hoods. Stories spread again of cursed men in mountains. Fear, fascination, and suspicion bled outward into surrounding lands. Inside Capraholm, tension grew unbearable. Festivals once joyous became somber. Men danced less, laughed little, always glancing toward passes as if expecting intruders. The weight of prophecy crushed celebration beneath its relentless presence. The goats mirrored unease. Sacred herds grew restless, bleating loudly during full moons, circling tighter around children, eyes glowing brighter in torchlight. Men whispered the herd knew the reckoning had arrived before they did. Fathers sought guidance in journal entries written generations earlier. The prophecy was vague, warnings of exposure, choices between revelation and destruction. But no clear path forward existed. Every word deepened dread instead of clarity. Some argued the covenant had run its course. Why should men continue binding themselves to beasts if horns doomed them anyway? Others insisted abandoning communion would bring famine, sickness, and the valley's collapse. Divisions grew visible in daily life. At markets, men whispered of elders hiding behind fear. At night, young men gathered on cliffs, declaring they would leave valley openly, horns gleaming proudly beneath stars. But leaving meant danger. Outsiders already told tales of horned figures. Soldiers might view them as abominations. Scientists might drag them into laboratories. Priests might declare them heretics. The outside world was not merciful. Still, the sixth generation was restless. Born into secrecy, they longed for more. Dreams filled their nights with visions of cities, crowds staring in awe. Some saw glory, others saw flames consuming everything. The goats offered only silence. They moved in patterns men no longer understood, gathering near ritual chambers without prompting. Their eyes lingered on horned sons, as though measuring them for a decision yet unspoken. When the communion came, sons entered caves with unease sharper than excitement. Ritual gestures felt heavier, chants hollow. They pressed foreheads to horns, breathed essence, but warmth that once comforted now burned like warning. Visions followed, mountains crumbling, rivers flooding, outsiders storming through passes. Sons awoke shaking, unable to speak. Fathers said dreams were always part of communion, but even elders admitted these visions were darker, heavier, undeniable. One night, storms tore across ridges, avalanches roaring down slopes. Villagers huddled together, horns gleaming in firelight. Some claimed mountain spirits were speaking, demanding choice. Others believed nature itself rejected continuation of silence. After storm, a hunter stumbled into valley, half frozen. Men offered shelter, but his gaze fell upon uncovered horns. He recoiled, whispering demons, before being silenced forever. Yet his fear confirmed what elders dreaded. The world was watching closer. Rumors spread through villages below. Whispers of men with horns grew bolder, harder to dismiss. Traders asked more questions. Officials sent scouts again. Secrecy thinned like melting snow. Elders debated desperate measures, exiling younger men, abandoning valley, or destroying sacred herd. None agreed. Each choice carried ruin. The sixth generation stood on edge of history, no solution offering survival without sacrifice. Some sons embraced prophecy as destiny. They declared horns a crown, proof they were chosen. They rallied peers, demanding to reveal themselves. Better to be known than to vanish in shadows, they proclaimed. Others resisted. Fear of cages, fires, and chains outweighed pride. They begged elders to preserve silence longer. The valley split into factions, unity shattered. The reckoning had arrived not only from outside, but within. Tension broke during festival. Younger men removed hats deliberately, horns catching firelight. Gasps echoed through crowd. Elders shouted, fists raised, goats bleated wildly. What began as celebration turned into chaos, generations clashing beneath mountain sky. Blood was nearly spilled that night. Fathers restrained sons, sons cursed fathers, elders collapsed in despair. For centuries, horns had united them. Now horns divided them more fiercely than any storm or famine. In following days, some young men vanished into passes. No one knew whether they survived. Perhaps they reached valleys below. Perhaps snow claimed them. Their absence deepened fracture, proving division had already become exile. The goats grew restless still, breaking fences, gathering near council stones unbidden. Men whispered herd prepared for something final. Every bleat sounded like warning, every glance like judgment upon human indecision. The journal's final prophecy echoed louder. Sixth generation will decide whether mountain keeps them or world consumes them. Fathers repeated words with trembling voices, but sons no longer found comfort in ink of ancestors. Arguments became nightly ritual. Fires burned as men shouted, "Choose revelation or deepen secrecy." Each side saw only ruin in the other's path. Yet indecision could not last. Watchers approached passes with growing persistence. Scouts spotted outsiders climbing again, more numerous, carrying equipment, rifles, notebooks. Time had expired. Capraholm could no longer hide. Horns glistened in moonlight, undeniable. The reckoning prophecy foretold was no longer future, but present. Some prepared to greet outsiders openly, horns uncovered. Others sharpened blades, determined to defend Valley through blood. The sixth generation would not move as one. Whatever happened, Capraholm would never again be the same. Storms gathered as if mountains themselves shared anxiety. Thunder echoed valleys, lightning illuminated horns like crowns of bone. Fathers prayed silently, sons stood restlessly, goats bleated in unison. Reckoning approached with every heartbeat. Choices loomed unbearable. Surrender to outsiders, reveal truth, risk annihilation. Or resist, retreat deeper, risk extinction by isolation. Either path ended the old way. The sixth generation would redefine or destroy everything. Men looked to mountains, searching for answers in ridges and storms. Yet mountains remained silent, offering no guidance. Only horns spoke, gleaming sharper, louder, heavier than words. Prophecy lived in their very bones. Thus the reckoning was not a single event, but unfolding storm. Division, prophecy, outsiders, goats, horns, all converged into one question. Could Capraholm remain itself, or was transformation demanding a destiny beyond mountains? No man could escape choice. Fathers, sons, elders, all carried horns, all bore burden. Sixth generation had come, prophecy fulfilled. The valley stood trembling between silence and revelation, its future carved in bone and shadow. And as dawn broke over peaks, horns caught first light, glowing red against snow. The reckoning had arrived fully. Capraholm's fate awaited decision, and every man knew tomorrow would never mirror yesterday again. Morning light broke across the ridges, painting snow with crimson glow. Men of Capraholm stood in silence, horns catching fire of dawn. The prophecy's end had come, and tomorrow's choice could no longer wait. Elders convened at Council Stone, voices heavy with weariness. They debated whether to welcome outsiders or repel them. Each option carried peril. Neither secrecy nor revelation offered safety without demanding sacrifice from every man. Younger men pressed for openness, arguing concealment had chained them too long. They dreamed of stepping proudly into world beyond mountains. Their horns, once shame, now seemed crowns demanding acknowledgement, even at risk of ruin. Older men resisted fiercely. They remembered stories of persecution, fires lit against difference, cages awaiting the strange. For them, secrecy was not burden, but shield. To abandon silence was to invite inevitable destruction. The goats moved uneasily near Council Stone, circling tighter than before. Their eyes gleamed amber, their presence undeniable. Some men whispered the herd awaited decision too, guardians of covenant as invested as humans themselves. Night fell heavy. Fires burned brighter against cold, horns shining in glow. Fathers passed final warnings, sons made secret vows. The valley throbbed with tension, each heartbeat a drum echoing choice not yet declared. Scouts confirmed outsiders had reached High Pass. They carried rifles, notebooks, and strange devices. They camped near Ridge, preparing descent. Capraholm's men realized dawn would bring confrontation. No further delay could shield them. Some sharpened blades, prepared to defend Valley with blood. Others laid aside weapons, insisting survival meant trust. Brothers clashed in words, but tomorrow would demand more than arguments. Tomorrow would demand irreversible action. During final communion, goats gathered more numerous than ever. Men pressed foreheads against horns, feeling surge of warmth coursing through veins. Dreams followed, Visions of fire, steel, cities, storms, futures unfolding in unbearable clarity. Some saw triumph, horned men leading proudly in open world. Others saw chains, laboratories, and flames devouring villages. No vision brought certainty. Communion revealed only possibilities, leaving choice to men who carried burden. Elders prayed silently, their words trembling. "Mountain, guide us." Sons whispered differently. "Mountain, free us." Between generations, hope and fear clashed more violently than storms beyond ridges. Prophecy lived in marrow, demanding resolution. As dawn returned, goats bleated fiercely, horns clashing as if echoing men's unrest. Fathers gathered sons, preparing for encounter. Valley air crackled with anticipation, silence broken only by wind carrying scent of snow. The outsiders descended cautiously, rifles slung, notebooks ready. Their eyes scanned strange village where men stood waiting, horns visible for first time. Gasps echoed among them, disbelief etched across faces confronting prophecy's truth. No longer concealed, horns gleamed openly. Sons stood tallest, refusing hats. Elders trembled but remained. Silence stretched unbearably until one outsider whispered, "Impossible." That word pierced Valley sharper than any blade or bullet. Tension erupted. Some villagers stepped forward with open hands, gestures of peace. Others brandished axes, eyes blazing with fury. Outsiders raised rifles instinctively, fear widening eyes. Choice teetered between alliance and annihilation. A single goat stepped between groups, horns massive, eyes glowing. Its presence froze moment. Men lowered weapons slightly, outsiders faltered. For breathless instant, Covenant's guardians seemed to hold fate in amber gaze. One young man spoke, voice steady. "We are not demons. We are sons of mountain. You came seeking truth. Now you see it. Decide if truth deserves respect or fire." Outsiders muttered among themselves, torn between fear and fascination. Scientists scribbled frantically, soldiers gripped rifles, commanders hesitated. None expected horns so real, so undeniable. Decision now belonged not only to Capraholm, but to world beyond. Back in village, elders argued still whether to expel outsiders or negotiate. Younger men demanded chance to prove themselves, to show horns could mean strength, not curse. Division deepened, yet silence no longer possible. That night, horns gleamed under moonlight as villagers gathered in square. Speeches rose, tears shed, voices cracked. Brothers embraced and cursed, fathers clutched sons tightly. Tomorrow promised change, whether chosen or forced upon them. Some argued Valley could retreat deeper into mountains, abandoning farms, herds, and homes. Others insisted running meant extinction. To survive, they must step forward. Fear could not hold against prophecy's demand for transformation. The goats bleated in chorus, a sound unlike ordinary calls. Men felt it vibrate in their bones, as if covenant itself demanded decision. Silence afterward felt heavier than snow upon rooftops. At dawn, villagers returned to Council Stone. Outsiders approached once more. This time, horns were displayed openly, no concealment attempted. Men stood tall, ready to speak or fight, determined to end centuries of silence. The commander of outsiders raised hand, signaling pause. His voice trembled as he asked, "What are you?" Silence followed until Elder replied, "We are men of mountain. We are horned sons. We endure." That answer lingered, heavy, undeniable. Outsiders lowered rifles slightly, confusion outweighing aggression. Scientists leaned forward eagerly, but soldiers frowned in suspicion. The balance remained fragile, yet blood had not yet been spilled. Within Valley, debate continued. Some saw this as beginning of coexistence. Others believed outsiders' curiosity would doom them. The sixth generation knew decision must come swiftly. Tomorrow could not wait another century. Elders feared slaughter, but younger men embraced hope. If we are to perish, let it be as ourselves, not as shadows, one declared. His words ignited courage and despair in equal measure. The goats gathered in vast circle around Council Stone, eyes glowing, horns clashing softly. Their presence reminded men covenant remained unbroken. Whatever choice was made, it would echo through sacred bond forever. Some outsiders pressed to study horns, to measure and record. Elders refused firmly, but sons allowed brief glimpses, revealing strength without surrender. Trust built slowly, fragile as ice yet undeniable in weight. Yet suspicion lingered. Soldiers eyed goats warily, hands twitching on triggers. Scientists argued for capture. Commanders feared rebellion. Outside world loomed dangerously close, pressing upon Valley's fragile balance like storm before collapse. That night, men debated again. Should they travel beyond mountains, revealing themselves fully, or demand outsiders leave, preserving secrecy longer? Each option promised loss, but indecision promised worse, extinction by hesitation. At dawn, Council declared choice. Capraholm would reveal itself, but on its own terms. Horns would no longer be hidden, goats no longer denied. They would walk into tomorrow openly, whatever consequence followed. The announcement split village. Some wept, some cheered, some cursed. Yet decision stood, secrecy had ended. Sixth generation would bear weight of truth revealed, not silence preserved. The prophecy had reached its fulfillment. Outsiders documented cautiously, yet refrained from violence. Curiosity outweighed fear. Soldiers lowered rifles reluctantly. Scientists whispered of history rewritten. Horned Sons of Capraholm stepped forward proudly, horns shining in morning sun like crowns. The goats bleated in unison, echoing across mountains. For men, it felt like acknowledgement, perhaps approval. The covenant endured, not broken by revelation. Instead, it expanded, binding them to future larger than Valley alone. Men of Capraholm embraced one another, uncertain of tomorrow, but certain of choice. They had survived famine, storms, secrecy, prophecy. Now they would face world openly, horns gleaming as testament to endurance. No one knew whether tomorrow promised salvation or ruin. Yet for first time, horns were not burden, but identity carried without concealment. The mountain had kept them, and now released them into history. Thus ended centuries of silence. The choice of tomorrow was made not by prophecy, but by men willing to face unknown. Horned Sons of Capraholm stood ready, united by covenant, awaiting whatever future demanded. And as dawn's light spread across valley, horns glowed crimson once more. Tomorrow had come, and with it, destiny no longer whispered in shadows, but spoken boldly in bone, in blood, in the mountain's breath.